Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's Stories. We now return to America is in the Heart, a Personal History by Carlos Bulosan. Part 3, Chapter 26. The old world will die. This was the new dictum of my life. I did not exactly know what it meant, but it was enough that my brother Macario had expressed it. It was a stirring law that governed my life and thoughts, and it did not matter who was going to die. It was enough that something horrible was to perish from the earth. The simple beginning of my intellectual awakening, the tragic death of Pascual and the imprisonment of Jose, the sudden change of Macario into a personality passionately reaching out for understanding, and my second encounter with Felix Razon. All these influences were enough to make my last few months of freedom useful and significant. The first issue of The New Tide was with the printers. When it came out, Jose and I took 100 copies and distributed them to some of the more literate farm workers. It did not create a sensation, but we did not expect anything spectacular. It was the first of its kind to be published by Filipinos in the United States, and it was fumbling and immature, but it promised to grow into something important in the history of Filipino social awakening. The magazine was one of several publications that had arisen all over the nation and had tried to grasp the social realities and to interpret them in terms of the needs of the decade. It sustained our lives, drowned our despair, and gave us hope. It broadened our scope and vision. Then it went out of existence. Its founders tried to revive it, but like the other publications born overnight to rally behind a new social idea, it died a natural death. It was like a world that died. Felix Razon wanted to save it. He went to work in a hotel in Hollywood and lived in the basement in order to save it. Nick found an apartment house in Beverly Hills. He worked 7 days a week for $25 a month. Macario went to work in a restaurant, but upon my advice, since there was no hope for the magazine, he went to New Mexico hoping to attend the university there. However, the magnificent spirit behind it did not die. It was born again in a more dynamic form when I acquired enough knowledge to revive the high idealism behind it. But what awed me in those early days were the sacrifices of the founders. I would ask myself, why 3 starving men were willing to give up their hard-earned money to make an obscure magazine live, denying themselves the simple necessities of food and shelter. They had surrounded the publication as though it were a little life about to die, or dying, or dead, and breathed life into it one after the other, looking desperate and lost when they realized that their efforts were futile. But it was an inspiring experience, watching these young men breathing life into a dead thing. Their efforts came to me again and again in the course of my struggle toward an intellectual clarification and a positive social attitude. An old world literally died with the magazine. An old generation of writers died with it too. A new generation was born with the same ideals, perhaps, but reinvigorated with new social attitudes. The labor movement was the paramount issue. It was winning the support of intellectuals and the advanced sections of the proletariat. Listening and watching attentively, I knew that it was the dawn of a new morning. I did not have to wait for the birth of a new world because what I had been told to fight for was here with its brilliant promises. How was I to understand it? Could I help? I knew that the most forlorn man in those rootless years was he who knew that love was growing inside him but had no object on which to bestow it. Upon my return to the Santa Maria Valley, I found that the Filipino Workers' Association, an independent union, was disintegrating. I rushed to join Jose in Lompok, where he had gone with Gaza men to see if there was a possibility of establishing a workers' newspaper. The three of us decided to form a branch there and to make it the center of Filipino union activities in Central California. Salinas was still the general headquarters of the association, but it was fast losing its authority and prestige. There was a mad scramble for power in the association among the national officers, and their bitter rivalries wrecked our chance toward the establishment of a more cogent labor organization. Actually, however, it was the birth of progressive leadership in the Filipino labor movement. The membership of the Filipino Workers' Association was tremendous, considering the myriad difficulties it met in the campaign to spread throughout the agricultural areas of California. The vigilant Filipino workers, their wholehearted support of the trade union movement, their hatred of low wages and other labor discriminations were the direct causes that instigated the persecutions against them, sporadic at first and then concerted but destructive to the nation's welfare. In Salinas, for instance, the general headquarters were burned after a successful strike of lettuce workers, and the president of the association was thrown in jail. Upon his release, he moved to Guadalupe in the south and campaigned for the purchase of a new building. Always alert, the Filipino agricultural workers throughout the valley rallied behind the proposal, and after a few months, a new national office was established. Again, striking for better wages, the Filipino lettuce cutters and packers succeeded, but lost the building and their right to build another in Guadalupe. Finally, Jose and I made the office in Lompok the temporary general headquarters. It was unconstitutional, of course, but the moment called for drastic action. Our move was without precedent, but we hoped to accomplish something, as we did. It was during our membership campaign that I came in contact with fascism in California. The sugar beet season was in full swing in Oxnard, but the Mexican and Filipino workers were split. The companies would not recognize their separate demands, and although there were cultural and economic ties between them, they had not recognized one important point: that the best companies conspired against their unity. That the beet companies conspired against their unity. I contacted a Filipino farm labor contractor and a prominent Mexican, and Jose, who joined us later, planned a meeting in the town park. I felt a little elated. Harmony was in the offing, but in the evening, when we were starting the program, deputy sheriffs came to the park and told us that our right to hold a meeting had been revoked. I did not know what to do. I was still a novice. An elderly Mexican told us that we could hold a meeting outside the city limit. There was a large empty barn somewhere in the south end of Oxnard. A truck came and carried some of the men, but most of them walked with us on the highway. They were very serious. I glanced at Jose, who was talking to three Filipinos ahead of me, and felt something powerful growing inside me. It was a new heroism, a feeling of growing with a huge life. I walked silently with the men, listening to their angry voices and to the magic of their marching feet. I was frightened, but I felt brave too. The Mexicans wanted a more inclusive union, but that would take time. We were debating the issue when I heard several cars drive into the yard. I signaled to the men to put out the lights and to take cover. They fanned out and broke through the four walls, escaping into the wide beet fields. I rushed upon the improvised stage and grabbed Jose, whose wooden leg had become entangled in some ropes and wires. "This is it! Yeah! Follow me! Right!" I jumped off the stage. Jose followed me. Then there was the sudden patter of many feet outside and shooting. I found a pile of dry horse manure in a corner of the barn. I told Jose to lie down. Then I covered him with it, exposing only his nose. I lay beside him and covered myself with it too. When I tried to talk, the manure went into my mouth and choked me. I lay still, waiting for the noise outside to subside. A man with a flashlight came inside and stabbed the darkness with the steely light, cutting swiftly from corner to corner. He came near the pile of manure, spat on it, and searched the ceiling. A piece of manure tickled my throat, and I held my breath, bringing tears to my eyes. The man went outside, joined his companions, and drove off to town. I pushed the dung away and jumped to my feet. "Did you see his face?" "No." "I saw it. He is a white man, all right. Let's run. There is still time." I crept to the wall and crouched in the darkness. I wanted to be sure that every man had gone. The way was clear. Jose followed me outside. Then we were running across a beet field, our feet slapping against the broad leaves that got in our way. The moon came up and shone brightly in the night. As I ran, I looked up to see it sailing across the sky. Then my fear was gone. I stopped running and sat down among the tall beets. Jose sat beside me. There were no words to describe the feeling in our minds and hearts. There was only our closeness and the dark years ahead. There was only the dark future. We walked across the beet fields to Camarillo, 5 miles south. The town was quiet and dark. It was surrounded by orange groves. We went into the local school building and slept on the floor. A teacher found us there in the morning. She threatened to call the police, and we rushed outside. We walked in the morning sun, smelling the orange blossoms and the clean air. I looked at the tall mountains on our right and stopped, remembering the mountains in my village. "You like the landscape?" Jose asked. "It's like my village," I said. "Tell me about it." "Well, it is hard to describe it to you, but the farther I go from it, the more vivid it becomes to me. Perhaps I am sentimental, but my village is not like any other village. There are mountains on one side, and there is the wide river on the other. A tongue of land extends into the river, and on this land are hills that are covered with guava trees. Now is the time for the guavas to bloom. I used to go there when I was a child, and the smell of the blossoms followed me down into the valley. Between the mountains and the river, in the center of the valley, is a papaya grove. Papayas are in bloom now. Did you ever smell papaya blossoms? There is nothing like it. Someday I will go back and climb these guavas again. Someday I will make a crown of papaya blossoms. Do you think I am sentimental?" "No," Jose said. "I know what you mean. We will go back someday. I will climb those guavas with you. We will swim in the river. The papayas are in bloom now, you say?" The journey to Ventura was shortened. We were following the state highway when a police patrol stopped us and took us to the city jail and held us on charges of vagrancy. When we were released, 3 days afterward, we took a bus to Lompok. But another strike was in the progress there. The lettuce workers had walked out 3 days before. I was informed that some of the men did not approve of the strike, but a white woman from Fresno had agitated them. Gaza men told me that she was staying at a local hotel. I asked Jose to go with me. It was already 1 in the afternoon, but the hotel was very quiet. I knocked on the door. A short, stocky, ordinary-looking woman with dark hair stood before me. "My name is Helen," she said, coming out with her overnight bag. "How is the strike this morning?" "My name is Jose," Jose said. "We came to you to talk about it. I hope you don't mind our bothering you." "Jose!" Helen was beaming. "You are the person I've been looking for in Lompoc. Mr. Magna in San Francisco recommended you." Jose's doubts vanished immediately. He knew Magna intimately. I walked eagerly with them to the office. But why did Helen talk as though this strike were a business? I was filled with doubts and premonitions. Chapter 27. Helen, realizing the importance of time, suggested that we proceed with the strike. Fired with new impetus, Jose worked night and day. The strike spread to Solvang and Las Cruces, where the Lompoc farmers controlled the agricultural products. The strikers organized reconnaissance squads and guarded the highway and other exits from the valley. It was exactly what Helen wanted. The trucks that carried the lettuce were driven by Japanese and white men to Las Cruces, where they were inspected by government officials before proceeding to Los Angeles. Helen wanted the hauling stopped. It was a dangerous move because the job of taking out the crates from the fields was done by Japanese and Mexican workers under the surveillance of highway patrolmen. I tried to argue with Helen against the use of firearms and violence in general, but gave up when some of the strikers became hysterical. The leaders of the squads wanted to install me as the new secretary of the local. I accepted it, not because I wanted it, but because the strike called for quick decision. Besides, I was beginning to understand the organized conspiracy against the agricultural workers in California. The strike taught me that I was definitely a part of the labor movement. On the third day, the reconnaissance squads rushed to the main highway where the loaded trucks would pass. The men spread out and waited on both sides of the road, becoming tense when the trucks appeared in the distance. But the drivers were guarded by motorcycle patrolmen, 3 on either side, releasing their sirens whenever they approached the strikers. When the first truck appeared in the bend of the road, the strikers came out and signaled to the driver to stop. The patrolmen rushed forward, clubbing the men who tried to climb into the trucks. About a dozen men turned over a truck, fighting their way out when the patrolmen turned around to beat them. The drivers leapt out and stayed away from the fight. In a few minutes, finding resistance impossible, the strikers rushed to their cars and drove madly to the office. 3 strikers were arrested on the spot, brought to town and thrown in jail. In the afternoon, a newspaper reporter from Santa Barbara came to our headquarters and reported that the strike was inspired by communists. The next day, believing the newspaper story, some of the townspeople joined the Mexican and Japanese laborers in the fields. The strike was completely broken. Great damage was done to organized Filipino labor. I was reluctant to believe that Helen had betrayed us, but when she disappeared at the termination of the strike, I suspected that she might be a professional strike breaker. Helen had shown me a subtle way of winning the rank and file, but she had also shown me a way of winning the leaders. In fact, she had shown me another way of abusing the trust and confidence of honest working men. When the strike was broken in Lompoc, Jose followed Helen to Salinas, where she had gone to spread calamity. I knew that they were living together as husband and wife in the Mexican section, and I intimated to Jose my suspicion. But he ignored my warning, because he was the ablest organizer among Filipinos in California. Helen got her man. She was paid to curtail the trend of agricultural workers toward the labor movement. Then I heard that the Salinas strike had been defeated or betrayed, and again Helen disappeared. Her ranch house was burned by unidentified persons and the blame was put on the strikers. It was the same old tactic, but still workable. Jose was arrested, but Helen, who was also arrested, was released immediately. It was evident that she was paid to create disunity among the strikers and to turn public opinion against them. When Jose was released by the International Labor Defense, which handled such cases, he went to San Francisco where he attended a workers' conference. I went to Los Angeles hoping to persuade my brother Macario to go to Santa Maria with me, where the two of us could work together because he was proficient in languages and was a forceful speaker. But he already had a job. He was more interested in the theoretical approach. I discovered with disappointment that his desire to go to college was fading. He was, however, reading extensively and acquiring books about world politics. I wanted Macario to complete his education because at that time I still believed that it was the only course for him. I remembered how our family had sacrificed everything for him, and when I saw him losing interest, I thought of the years when I had been with my father on the farm in Mangusmana. I recalled that my most wonderful days were those centered around Macario, when he was away from Binalonan, when he was studying in Lingayen, and when he came back one vacation time to cut my hair. I wrote to my brother Amado in Phoenix, but when he received my letter, he was already in San Francisco. He was living at the St. Francis Hotel with the man for whom he was working, a big-time racketeer lawyer from Los Angeles. I went to San Diego, where the Filipino pea pickers were on strike. When I returned to Los Angeles, a letter from Amado was waiting for me. He was in Hollywood. I went to see him immediately. He was staying in a luxurious room, but it was actually rented by the lawyer. They always lived together when they were traveling. In fact, Amado said proudly, we sometimes sleep with the same woman. I did not believe him. How was it that a successful lawyer would share a room with his servant? But Amado disappointed me. He was in a position to help Macario go to college, but would not. It was the beginning of a long estrangement between Amado and me. I'm going into a new world, Carlos, Amado said, away from our people. I'm sorry it's this way. I knew that he had deserted us. Even his speech was rapidly becoming Americanized. I'm sorry too, I said. Goodbye. I walked out of his room and his life forever. I lived with Macario in his little room on Flower Street, hoping to read some of his books and magazines. I went to the public library, fumbling for knowledge in the enormous building. One day, Macario took a civil service examination, although he knew that he could not get the job. Why? I asked. California doesn't employ Filipinos in civil service jobs, he said. Is there a law about it? None, but it is a matter of personal interpretation of our status in the United States. Citizenship, then, is the basis of all this misunderstanding? You can put it that way. I was discovering things. Where should I begin? It was then that Helen came to Los Angeles. She saw me at a meeting of the Labor Relations Board and the workers' representatives at the post office. She grabbed me, pretending excitement and joy. I played my part, wanting to know what she was doing. We went outside and walked in the autumn shower. The sky was dark and there was a cold wind. I took Helen with me to my brother's room. There was no other place for us to go because my brother was beginning to integrate his beliefs. I warned him against Helen, but it was useless. She had found her next victim, but her method was more subtle. She was dealing with an intellectual and used a different strategy. She succeeded living with Macario and despising me. I was dejected and lost. I could not believe it. The gods of yesterday were falling to pieces. They were made of clay. I had to make my own gods, create my own symbols, and worship in my own fashion. Yes, this is what I would do, now that all of yesterday was dying. I was about to leave Los Angeles when Jose arrived. He had heard that Helen was in town. He wanted to stop her doing any more damage to the Filipinos. She was not only involved with powerful agricultural groups, but was also connected with certain self-styled patriotic organizations that considered it their duty to terrify the lives of minorities in the state. Helen's suspicion that Macario was what she called a professional agitator revealed her stupidity. There was nothing in my brother's activities that would indicate his political connections. He was simply a man who had been awakened by a dynamic social idea. How to realize it was beyond him. Although he wanted a course of action, he was incapable of working it out to the end. He was by inclination an intellectual, a visionary, a dreamer. The turmoil in the agricultural areas of California were but reverberations of a greater social catastrophe. When Jose, infuriated by Helen's lack of integrity, accused her of being an agent of anti-union interests, she retorted savagely, "I hate the Filipinos as deeply as I hate unions. You are all savages, and you have no right to stay in this country." I struck her in the face with a telephone receiver. Something fell from her mouth. Now let her speak arrogantly about the Filipinos. When Jose saw that I was going to hit her again, he charged suddenly and knocked me down. When I scrambled to my feet, Helen was already running down the alley toward the street. It was the end of Helen among Filipinos, but she had done enough damage. I had often wondered what became of her. I later heard unconfirmed reports that she had been beaten to death in Visalia. Chapter 28. The disappearance of Helen marked the end of the Filipino Workers' Association. Terrorism was loosened upon the agricultural workers, and special committees were formed to lobby in the state legislature and in Congress to bring about the regimentation of migratory workers. The big farmers had gone so far as to curtail all civil liberties for farm laborers. They also designed to wreak unicism by instigating lurid campaigns among the urban population to teach them to fight union activities. In this open conspiracy to undermine a democratic government, the farmers had miscalculated the reaction of the workers who led an urban life, for they succeeded only in epitomizing the fact that both urban and rural workers depend on each other's labor in the struggle for security and the right to organize and bargain collectively. For they succeeded only in epitomizing the fact that both urban and rural workers depend on each other's labor in the struggle for security and the right to organize and bargain collectively, but not realizing that we were facing a powerful enemy. Jose and I and other labor leaders met in the house of a newspaper reporter, Millar, in San Francisco, and mapped out a plan to start a unified statewide union campaign. When we adjourned Ganzo, who was working with Pascual's wife on a new newspaper in San Francisco, went to Santa Maria, where he was familiar with the workers. When we adjourned Ganzo, who was working with Pascual's wife on a new newspaper in San Francisco, went to Santa Maria, where he was familiar with the workers. Jose and I wanted to work together in Central California, embracing, of course, all the agricultural towns in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. Felix Razon, toughened by the years, enthusiastically went to Imperial Valley, where the fascist elements worked more openly than in other parts of the state. Nick went to Los Angeles, where he could work with my brother Macario among the city laborers, but the Orange counties and San Diego were also his territories. Millar remained in San Francisco to work closely with a Filipino communist in Sacramento, who went to Stockton afterward to help me organize a political steering committee. Conrado Torres, who had worked with me in the fish canneries in Alaska several years before, went to Seattle and from there proceeded to Yakima Valley, leaving Mauro Perez to consolidate what he had started to organize. Gaza men went to Portland, where they were joined by Mariano, and the three started an aggressive, militant, and progressive committee. Jim Luna and I were the only members of our group who had had no college education. But Jim had served in the Navy for many years and had gained experience. When we parted, we were conscious of the tremendous task before us, that if we failed in ourselves, we would also fail in its realization. From this day onward, my life became one long conspiracy, working in the daytime and meeting other conspirators at night. I was so intensely fired by this dream of a better America that I had completely forgotten myself. But when I discovered myself again, I found that I was still a young man, though broken in health. I was suffering from a disease that changed the whole course of my life, that halted my pursuit of the dream in a corner of the terrible years. In Santa Maria, where I was working with Jose, I received a disturbing communication from Millar. Trouble was brewing in San Jose, 40 miles south of San Francisco. Jose and I took the first bus. Stopping a few hours in San Luis Obispo to see how Ganzo was progressing. In the early morning, after a lengthy deliberation with Ganzo in his cabin, we rushed to the station and slept in the bus until Salinas. I still do not know why Jose and I never discussed unionism and politics when we were alone. It was only when we were with others, when we were in action, that we spoke aloud and acted according to our judgment. But I knew that I was coming to a way of thinking that would govern my life in the coming years. I surmised that the same evolution was taking place in Jose, but there was still no term for it. I believed then that agitating the agricultural workers was enough, but the next 5 years showed me that a definite political program was also needed. Millar was not at our rendezvous in San Jose. I went to the lettuce fields and talked to the workers. The companies had drastically cut the wage scale. The year before it had been 30 cents an hour, but now it had been reduced to 20 cents. The Filipino workers struck, but the companies imported Mexican laborers. There should be a law against the importation of labor, I said. It should be included in the interstate laws. The time will come, Jose said. Without it, the workers will always be at the mercy of the employers. You are absolutely right, Carl, Jose said. But we have a good president in Washington, so we will probably win some of our demands if we use enough pressure. I was not satisfied, but there was some hope. I went to the Mexican district and gathered together some of the Mexicans who had quit the fields that day. Jose, who spoke fluent Spanish, came and explained to them the importance of the strike. They were enthusiastic. A runner was sent to the fields to stop the Mexicans who were still working, and he came back to tell us that only 50 remained. But we wanted an all-out strike, although we doubted that it would be possible. That night, when Jose and I were in the back room of a restaurant, preparing a leaflet to be circulated, 5 white men came suddenly into the room. I started to run to the door, but I was too late. 2 big men, one wearing dark glasses, carried off Jose. The other man suddenly turned around and shot out the light bulbs. I was kicked into the back seat of a big car. Jose was in the front seat, between the driver and the man with dark glasses. When the car started to move, I looked down and saw Millar bleeding on the floor. He looked up at me with frightened eyes, pleading, wanting to tell me that he had nothing to do with our arrest. I turned the other way, aching to hit him in the face. I looked through the window, hoping to find some escape. I was sure that if the car turned the corner, I could jump out. If I succeeded in jumping out, could I escape their guns? My heart almost stopped beating. It was better to die trying to escape than to wait for death. But when the car came to a deserted country road, I knew that flight was impossible. I lost all hope. I glanced quickly at the wide, clear fields, catching a fleeting glimpse of the sky. Looking swiftly to the east, I saw the big moon, and below it, soon to move away, a mass of clouds that looked like a mountain of cotton balls. Suddenly, I remembered that as a child, I used to watch snow-white clouds sailing in the bright summer skies of Mangusmana. The memory of my village made my mind whirl, longing for flight and freedom again. I was helpless now. I watched my companions. They seemed to have given up all hope. There was only death at the end of the road. The white men were silent. Millar touched my legs when we passed in the shadows of trees. The driver turned off the road and crossed a wide beet field, heading for the woods not far away. We entered the woods, and in 5 minutes the car stopped. One of the men in front jumped out and came to our door. "You have the rope, Jake?" "Yeah!" The man on my right got out and pulled me violently after him, hitting me on the jaw. I fell on my knees, but got up at once, trembling with rage. If only I had a gun or a knife, I could cut these bastards into little pieces. Blood came out of my mouth. I raised my hand to wipe it off, but my attacker hit me again. I staggered, fell on my face, and rolled on the grass. "Up! God damn you! Up!" Painfully, I crawled to my feet, knelt on the grass, and got up slowly. I saw them kicking Millar in the grass. When they were through with him, they tore off Jose's clothes and tied him to a tree. One of them went to the car and came back with a can of tar and a sack of feathers. The man with the dark glasses ripped the sack open, and white feathers fell out and sailed in the thin light that filtered between the trees. Then I saw them pouring the tar on Jose's body. One of them lit a match and burned the delicate hair between his legs. "Jesus, he's a well-hung son of a bitch. Yeah! No wonder whores stick to them. The other monkey ain't so hot." They looked in my direction. The man with the dark glasses started beating Millar. Then he came to me and kicked my left knee so violently that I fell on the grass, blinded with pain. Hardening my body, I wished I were strong enough to reach him. He spat in my face, "Tuh," and left. Another man, the one called Jake, tied me to a tree. Then he started beating me with his fists. Why were these men so brutal, so sadistic? A tooth fell out of my mouth, and blood trickled down my shirt. The man called Lester grabbed my testicles with his left hand and smashed them with his right fist. The pain was so swift and searing that it was as if there were no pain at all. There was only a stabbing heat that leapt into my head and stayed there for a moment. "Shall we burn this yellow belly?" "He's gone." "I'd like a souvenir." "Scalp him." "What about the other bastard?" "He's gone too." They left me. One of them went to the car and took out a bottle of whiskey. They started drinking, passing the bottle from hand to hand. Once in a while, when a bottle was emptied, one of them would come over and beat me. When they were drunk enough, I feared that they would burn Jose. Millar crawled painfully over to where I was laying. "Knife in my left shoe," he whispered. "Quiet." I rolled over and reached for the knife. Now I could cut the ropes that tied my legs. My hands were free. Then I was ready to run. I handed the knife back and whispered to Millar to roll away. I crawled in the grass slowly. Then I reached the edge of the woods. I got up and tried to run, but I had almost no use of my left leg, so that most of the time I hopped through the beet fields like a kangaroo. The night was clear and quiet. I was afraid they would see me. I heard their voices on the wind. Once a flashlight beamed from the edge of the woods. I lay flat on my stomach and watched it disappear among the trees. Then I got up and staggered toward San Jose. I stopped when I came to the lighted areas to avoid suspicion. I turned away from the business district and headed for the Oriental section. A police car came by. I turned in at the side door and opened it. I found myself in a little room with dolls on the bed and a portable radio on a small table. On the dresser was the picture of a woman who might have been 25. Someone was in the bathroom, for I could hear a noise there. I was reaching for the doorknob when a white woman came out. She stopped short in surprise, letting the towel fall from her hands. "Please don't be afraid," I said. "Some men are after me." She came forward. "Have you killed somebody?" "No." "Did you steal some money?" "No, I work with the unions." She ran to a little room and brought me a clean shirt. She brought a basin of warm water and began washing my face gently. Then she took me to the kitchen, where she prepared something for me to eat. I watched her. She might inform the police. Could I trust her? "When did you eat last?" she asked. "I don't remember," I said. "Poor boy." She got up, ate everything, and go to sleep. I almost cried. What was the matter with this land? Just a moment ago, I was being beaten by white men. But here was another white person, a woman, giving me food and a place to rest, and her warmth. I sat on the couch and started talking. I wanted to explain what happened to me. "Poor boy." There was kindness in her face, some urge to reach me, to understand what I was telling her. And sometimes when she was touched by my description, I could feel her kind hand on my face. There was tenderness in her touch. "Thank you so much," I said. "Go to sleep now." So she switched off the lights and went to her bed. I watched her in the darkness of the room because by now I was used to darkness. I could see in the dark almost as clearly as in a room flooded with lights. "Good night," she said. I lay quietly on the couch. Then tears began to come to my eyes. What would happen to Jose and Millar? Had I the right to run away? Had I? "The fight must go on," Jose used to say. All right, I would go on with the fight. I would show them. The silence outside was deepening. Not far away in a nearby farmhouse, I could hear a rooster crowing. The woman was still awake. She sat up. She heard me crying. She got up and came to my couch. "What is your name?" she asked. "Carl," I said. "Remember me only as Carl. That's all." "Mine is Marian," she said. "Go to sleep now." She woke me up early in the morning. I was surprised to find that she had packed her things. "Wait for me here," she said. "I'll get my car." In 5 minutes, she was back. I carried the suitcases into the car. She sat at the wheel and put the key in the lock. Then she looked back to the town as though she were committing it to memory. I knew her look because I had done the same thing 100 times. It was a farewell look, forever. The car started to move. "We'll go to Los Angeles," she said. I looked out of the window. The sun was rising. Chapter 29. When we were a few miles from San Jose, Marianne began talking. I discovered that she had lived in Oregon as a child. The town was Tigard, she said, where the ground was covered with snow all winter. I washed dishes in Portland while I was going to college, she said. I have also washed dishes all over California. I knew that there were girl dishwashers in Portland. Most of them were employed in little restaurants, but they were poorly paid. I looked at Marianne's hands. It was obvious that she had done manual work. Her hands were rough. The fingers were stubby and flattened at the top. My heart ached, for this woman was like my little sisters in Binalonan. I turned away from her, remembering how I had walked familiar roads with my mother. I went to Reed College for 2 years, Marianne went on, hoping to escape from the narrowing island that was Tigard. When summer came, I picked hops with Mexican families, but some gypsies came to the fields too. When winter came, I went to Portland, and there I met a man. I thought it was love, you know? We women always think that it is love, although we may feel that perhaps it is not. We are more emotional, I suppose. I lived with him for a while, working and planning for the future. Then I found out that he was married, had 3 children, and was a gambler. It was the beginning of my life of bitterness. She stopped and offered me a cigarette. I told her that I did not smoke. She continued, I tried to make a new life, without illusions. I went on my way. I worked here and there, living a new life, beginning to be strong inside again. I even thought of going back to college. I wanted to teach, you know. Then I met another man who took me to Los Angeles, and there he died in an automobile accident. My whole world died with him, and I died too. I saw tears falling from her eyes. She blinked them away. I looked straight ahead, feeling an ache inside me. Now, she was crying. I wanted to go to school too, I said, but that was a long time ago in the Philippines. You were still young, she said. There is plenty of time. I don't know. I'll help you. I'll work for you. You will have no obligations. What I would like is to have someone to care for, and it should be you who are young. I would be happier if I had something to care for, even if it were only a dog or a cat. But it doesn't really matter which it is, a dog or a cat. What matters is the affection, the relationship between you and the object. Even a radio becomes almost human, and the voice that comes from it is something close to you. And then there grows a bond between you. For a long time now, I've wanted to care for someone, and you are the one. Please, don't make me unhappy. We arrived in Salinas in the late afternoon. Marianne sent me to a hotel. She told me that she had relatives in town whom she wanted to see. I sat in my room and told the clerk to send a bellboy. I was hungry and I wanted something to eat. I did not want to be seen. I paced endlessly, waiting for Marianne. I tried to contact Mariano, who had come to Salinas with Ganzo. I waited for Marianne until 1 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up at 7, I saw her smiling near my bed. She had brought some peaches and a bottle of milk. She was very tired and sleepy. Where have you been? I asked, and there was excitement in my voice. With friends, she said, trying to be gay. I'm sorry if I have worried you, but you must get used to it, Carl. Now I need a few hours of sleep. I sat around watching her. She woke up a little after noon and told me that we would proceed to Los Angeles. I would like you to go to school there, she said. She was very gay. She kept tossing her brown hair back to the nape of her neck. She hummed a sweet tune that was new to me. I began telling her about my life, from my island village up to that time. She looked at me with surprise when I said something incredible. She opened the window of the car on her side and strong, fresh air flooded in, blowing her hair upon my face. I smelled the sweetness of her, like delicious wine. I was not afraid anymore. I felt free now and inspired, and my defenses were down. I was weakening. This Marianne, she was small, quiet, and lovely with long brown hair. Her hair, where had I seen it before? The girl on the freight train, could it be the same person? I glanced at Marianne's face. I was not sure. It was so long ago. She was sweet and near. But I could not touch her, even when she came, even when she was close to me, even when all her thoughts were leaning toward me and her heart was in my heart. We stopped in San Luis Obispo. Marian left me in a chop suey house. I walked to the house where Pascual had lived, in the Chinese district. I knocked on the door and Ganzo opened it. He was silent and mysterious. I did not understand why. I thought you were in Sacramento, he said. I didn't go there. He reached for a bottle of wine and poured some into a large glass. I knew that something was bothering him. How was the work in San Luis Obispo? I asked. They are coming closer, he said weakly. I don't think we will succeed. We are outnumbered. I noticed that his hands were not steady. We will be crushed to the last man, he said, but we will show them that we are not afraid. I guess that's it. Heroism of the spirit. We have it all right, I said. Ganzo got up to reach for the bottle and suddenly crashed to the floor. I rushed to pick him up. Then I saw the horrible lacerations on his back. He, too, had been beaten. He looked helplessly at me. Gazamen has been got, he whispered. Try to do something, Carl. I could not do anything for Gazamen. I stayed with Ganzo until the following morning. I was drinking coffee when I heard Marian's horn. Burp. How she knew where I was, I have never found out. I told Ganzo that I was leaving for Los Angeles. Are you quitting? He asked. No, but I would like to have a few days of rest. Don't desert us, Carl. No matter what becomes of you. No matter where you are. Goodbye. I ran to the car feeling like a traitor. Marian was silent for a long time while we were among the hills and the wide fields, the verdant valleys and forests. It was only when we were entering Santa Barbara that she began to talk. We stopped on Canyon Perdido Street, where Marian told me to wait. But when she drove off, I walked to the Chinese district. There I met Florencio Garcia, a busboy in a local hotel, who took me to his room over a garage. In the narrow space between his bed and a pile of books, Garcia sat down and started reading his manuscripts to me. He was writing, he said, but could not sell his stories. He jumped to his feet when he wanted to emphasize some point, stabbing the air with his fists. I'll be the greatest Filipino novelist in my time, he screamed, his hungry eyes popping in their sockets. You will, Florencio, I said. I will not be a busboy for long. I'll show them. His urge to write was spurred by hate. I recalled another lonely Filipino writer who had committed suicide, and I felt sorry for Florencio. I knew that he would destroy himself like Esteban, who had jumped from the window of his hotel when starvation had reached his mind. When I made a motion to leave, Florencio started to cry. Don't leave me, Carl, he wept. I'm lonely. I've not found a human being for 12 years. Don't ever leave me, my friend. I walked down the creaking stairs, looking up at his window when I reached the ground. I saw his ugly face breaking into tears. I walked back to Canyon Perdido Street and slapped my own face so that I would not cry. Marian was waiting for me. "Hello, Carl," she said, leaning over to touch my face. Then she started the car, driving faster and faster as we sped toward Los Angeles. It was only when we reached Santa Monica that my tension died. I got out in the business district of Los Angeles and told Marian to meet me at a downtown hotel. She was gone for 3 days. I stayed in my room most of the time. I tried to contact Macario, but failed. I knew that Amado was in Phoenix with the lawyer. I communicated with Conrado in Seattle about the progress of the work there. He wrote that there had been a clash between the union and the company. I felt helpless and torn. I stayed in my room without food, thinking, fighting against myself and waiting for Marian. When she appeared, singing and laughing, I was disarmed. I could not run away from her. "Now you can go to the university," she said, tossing a roll of money on the bed. "Nearly $300, all for you, from Marian." She laughed. "I have deposited some more for you, Carl. Now I'll go to bed, but wake me up if I oversleep." She flung herself upon the bed, and in a few minutes she was sound asleep. I stood watching her face. I took off her shoes and dress and tucked her inside the bed. It was like a fairy tale. Here I was, with a white woman who had completely surrendered herself to me. "The human heart is bigger than the world," I said to myself. Marian woke up at 10 in the evening. "Let's have a capitalist dinner," she said. I had no idea of what she was driving at, but I said, "All right, Marian." "Thank you," she said. "For what? For mentioning my name? I like the sound of it, the feel of it too. Thank you again. It's love, I guess." She put her face up like a white rose and wept. Then she pushed me gently away and said, "Turn away now. I'll change my dress." I turned amused. She was dancing and humming. When I looked at her, I was startled by her beauty. She seemed an entirely new person. She was wearing a dark suit. There was a red hat in her left hand and a pair of white gloves in the other. She was tall and straight and lovely. She was the song of my dark hour. We took a taxi and went to a famous nightclub in Hollywood. I was afraid to go inside, but did not want to show my fear to Marian. I followed her slowly, hardening myself. But I found that the people were more tolerant there than in any other place. They looked toward our table now and then, but it was merely curiosity. I looked at Marian's animated face. It was unbelievable that I could sit with a white girl in a famous place. I began remembering my years in the freight trains. Marian touched my hand. Oh, she was happy. She wanted to dance. I had never danced in a place like this, but I would do anything for Marian. I knew that if a man insulted me, I would jump at him with my knife. But the people were very tolerant. We danced twice. Then, having swept the dining room with a beaming face, Marian told me that she was tired. It was when we were crossing the street toward my hotel that she fainted. I gathered her in my arms, put her on my bed, and called the doctor. "She is very sick," he said. "I'll have to transfer her to my office." "Is it the only way?" "It is." I could not sleep when Marian was gone. I went to the doctor's office early the next morning. Marian was sitting up in bed. "It was foolish of me to faint last night," she said apologetically. "It was such a lovely evening." "I'll always remember it," I said. "How do you feel?" She turned away. She looked at me again when I touched her hand. "Listen carefully, Carl," she said. "When I'm gone, remember me once in a while. And if you meet someone that you could like, Take her with you and remember my face and hers. Don't talk like that, Marianne. I'm dying. Didn't the doctor tell you? Look at those trees on the hills. Isn't this land of ours a paradise? Silence. Then she said, Promise me something, Carl. I nodded. Promise me not to hate, but love. Love everything good and clean. There is something in you that radiates like an inner light, and it affects others. Promise me to let it grow. I wanted to ask her what I would do with her money, but she had turned toward the hills again. Her eyes were lost and far away. Slowly she closed them. Then she was sound asleep. I got up and walked away, committing her face to memory. I went to see her again the following morning. She was delirious. The doctor told me to leave. I went to a bar and started drinking heavily. I staggered aimlessly along the street. Then my mind collapsed into darkness. It is, I believe, called toxic amnesia. I found myself walking in Alhambra, 10 miles away from Los Angeles. I rushed to a public phone and called the doctor. You'd better hurry, he said. It is only a matter of minutes. I dashed down the street shouting for a taxi. When I arrived, the doctor met me. It is too late, he said kindly. She is gone now. I was stunned. I groped blindly into the room and looked at her still face. Her brown hair was like a nest around her head. A nurse came in and slowly rolled her away. The world stood still. I walked outside and the doctor stopped me. What was it, doctor? I asked. Syphilis, he said. But it was more than that. Complications. She gave up without a struggle. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything for her. Slowly, I walked down the suddenly darkened street.